Do you have the habits of a millionaire property investor and don't even know it yet?
If you can tap into people who are already there, it can be super powerful. You want to start building a big portfolio, is the biggest component.
Sam Gordon, founder of Australian Property Scout, who's built a $48 million portfolio with over 100 rental properties.
What?
From someone who started as a farmhand and has now created 317 millionaires. We wanted to get Sam to share all the traits these property millionaires have in common.
The number one, it's actually a circle of influence. For me, it's the most important. The thing that moves the most, if you were to really drill it down into creating millionaires.
Opening up simple changes that can completely change your life trajectory.
If I throw one little thing on this as well, because I know you're liking the stories on that side as well. Him and Kyle chat outside, and then this dude drives past in the Lamborghini, and Kyle goes, man, that'll never be us. And I go, why not? Guess how many properties he's bought in 12 months? He just settled on his third property.
What a weapon.
Most people aren't born with this stuff. They have to grow into it to become a millionaire. Probably the biggest one.
So if you want to make it big in property investing and understand the habits that are in your control that 317 millionaires have in common, this is an episode you're going to enjoy. My name's Todd Sloan. You're listening to the Pizza and Property Podcast, and this is my chat with Sam Gordon. Sammy Gordon, it's been too long, man.
Todd, mate, it's great to be back down here, man. Good to catch up with you.
Man, it's always a pleasure. And we're going to be talking about something I don't think I've ever actually talked about with anyone on the show before.
Interesting.
How many millionaires have you created now? Like, is it?
Mate, I did a deep dive on the plane as we're coming down here, and I believe it is, well, from what I could count and justifiably say, 317 millionaires.
Okay, and I wanted to make sure that this isn't like a flex episode of like, how sick is that? This is about pulling all of it apart and going into the nitty gritty. But the thing that I really thought was interesting though, is because if we look at your sort of general age demographic, a lot of the time it's people in like their 30s, maybe 40s, obviously swings either side as well.
Yep.
Predominantly. I've got this from livingaustralia.org. Research has found that couples aged between 50 and 70 years have the highest median net worth of nearly $900,000, while singles aged between 30 and 40 have the lowest median net worth of nearly $50,000. We're talking about...
So 30 to 40s have got less than 20 to 30s?
No, the other one's 50 to 70.
Oh, they're the only two that are in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a unique study.
Sorry, mate. Unique. We leave everyone else out.
But I probably didn't even need to read the first bit. The point of it is the people in your demographic are normally worth like 50 grand.
Okay.
That's like the average.
Yeah.
We're talking about 317 people that fall into that demographic that now have $1 million. Not like Dr. Evil styles, but at least $1 million in equity.
Yeah.
It's a pretty huge achievement.
Yeah, man. It's really cool. It was actually really cool to kind of work it out because when you said it to me, I was a bit like, oh man, I don't want it to come across, in a negative way of trying to do that. And you're like, nah, but it's just like, what have you seen? What's the most common stuff that you see within these guys that helps them get to that level? And I was like, that makes sense. That'd be cool to unpack.
Well, and before we get into the list and start unpacking, because I think there's 5 different things that we're going to talk about.
Yep.
Is there anything that you want to set the stage with or talk about with this episode first?
I think the thing to remember, like I'm in my 6th year of business now. So some guys I've been working with for 4, 5, 6 years. And the cool thing is kind of watching these guys go through such a transition in their portfolio. And some of these guys have been, guys and girls that have been starting out in their 20s and 30s, that have started and really built something over a few years. And then some have been in their 50s, and there's people in their 60s that I work with as well that have like really like changed a huge part of their lives by going through property. And yeah, man, like I think it's been really cool kind of watching the property game over the last few years as well. Because realistically, you buy 3 to 4 like well-placed properties in the right markets at the right time, and you buy the right houses in those markets, that generally will create you $1 million worth of net equity over the last few years if you've bought in at the right price at the right time. So
we're not talking about people that have bought like 10, 20 properties, nothing crazy.
No, man, nothing crazy. Like realistically, dude, like if you had bought a well-priced property at say $400,000 to $500,000 in Brizzy, Adelaide and Perth in 2020, 2021, you should be sitting at $1 million net equity.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It shows the power of consistent accumulation, like keeping them up. So yeah, man, it's cool.
So what's number 1 on the list as far as the most common traits that all of these investors share?
The number one, and I put it number one because for me, it's the most important. And I see it as the most important because it's probably one of the biggest things for myself for success in life and actually being able to push really hard. It's actually a circle of influence. So it's who you actually surround yourself with. And why it's such a big one is because what we see is so many people get talked out of actually going out and, buying and investing and going down that avenue where they get talked out of whatever it is in their life that they're wanting to do. Surrounding themselves with the right people and only allowing the correct people in that, like, not just the people who just pump them up for the sake of pumping them up, but actually gives potentially good criticism, good feedback, but actually still help along the journey rather than just trying to shoot everything down. Or you may even have people that are kind of negatively there trying to actually pull you back. Man, having the right team around you, the right people, not even just team, but the right people around you, that correct circle of influence, it's a game changer. When you're trying to do it yourself, the hardest thing about trying to do it yourself is that mind. You got no one to bounce anything off, right? For one, but the mindset, like things are going to pop up, and you got no one to talk to about. You can land in quite a dark place and quite a hard, scary place to kind of get out of. So having that really strong circle of influence allows you to keep moving forward and have people that you can kind of bounce ideas off with and spitball ideas with as well. So it's it's absolutely paramount having the right team around you and the right people around you.
Do you find most of the people that you've worked with have had that circle of influence, or they've built it, or is it a combination of both? Like, how is that?
Definitely a combo, but I would say 50% don't have it. 50% are surrounded by people that a lot of the time, so often, probably one of the most common things I hear is that I have no one to talk to about this stuff. So it's even funny, like when they listen to the podcast, they feel like they're part of the boys having a chat about property or whatever.
Yeah.
Man, so many of them don't actually have friends to kind of talk to about this sort of stuff. A lot of people can't talk to their family members about it. It's just, man, I think I don't know if it's just purely kind of an Australian thing, but it just seems to be one of those almost like a little bit of a taboo topic when you start talking about, trying to create serious wealth and stuff as well. Yeah, a lot of people kind of get that pushback on it. So surrounding yourself with the right people with it ensures that you're able to kind of keep pushing forward and stay positive, keep moving.
And so what do you normally do? Like if you're on a call with someone and they're like, yeah, like Sam, I love this, but I just, like you said, can't talk to anyone about it. Maybe my family are even a little bit against it, thinking I'm doing like risky gambling kind of stuff. They don't understand the investing. What kind of advice do you give them to build up that circle of influence?
So the closest one, I reckon the real key one, and this is what I do with our podcast, Scouting Australia, and obviously people can do this with Pizza and Property as well, because there's so many good stories that are aired on this, man. There's so many good stories that you share, and it doesn't necessarily need to be an investor story, but it can be either an investor story or something that's like a really moving or really like powerful episode, right? And so often what we'll do, and this is what we recommend people do, it's generally an investor story. Listen to an investor story of someone that's like similar to that and go, man, I was listening to this episode and it made me think of you because this person was like exactly in your situation. And then they send them the podcast and they listen to it. And you're going to get one of two things. You're going to get negative feedback, go, oh, I could never do that, or I could never do this, or whatever. Or you get the positive feedback and you go, oh my God, thank you so much for sending me that episode. And then a conversation starts from it. Because so often the biggest thing that we find is people that can't talk to anyone about it, or they don't know how to broach the subject. So often what we found is when people actually go down this path and they send it out, and because it's almost like they can listen to it or they can't listen to it. They can listen to it or they won't listen to it. It's one or the other, and it's not the end of the world. But what it can start to do is open the doors of people who are actually already in your inner circle that might be willing to have a conversation about it and start talking about it. And then you guys can get on the same page about it.
Okay, so before you look outside, look inside.
100%, man. They're already there. They're already there.
Sense. And maybe they're feeling the same way that you are, going, I just no one to talk to.
No one to talk to about it. Yeah, for sure.
I like that.
For sure.
That's good.
So, man, we found that's been a really, really powerful way of doing it. And sharing things, exactly like that. Either people that are in that same scenario, or maybe you hear something that's just a super powerful episode about strategy or something, and you just go, man, like this is crazy what you could do in this scenario or whatever. Send that sort of thing on. Even just trying to broach a subject a lot of the time. But I find the really cool icebreaker with who's within your circle already, it's just sending out a podcast that you found really inspirational or you think would relate to someone that's already in the circle that you'd like to talk about. Flick that over, see how that goes. We found so many people that actually like bridges the gap and they start talking about it. We've had that many people that like the whole circle was thinking it, but no one wanted to say it. And then bang, all of a sudden there's like 5 or 6 guys or girls or whatever that then they all start talking about, and they all start investing and actually getting in on it. And so often they don't actually even know that each of them have bought it, but they just didn't want to broach the subject with their friends in case it offended anyone or ruffled feathers from that end as well.
There's a saying that I say on the show all the time, which is normalize, don't idolize. It's just good because it rhymes. but there's a lot of truth to it. And I think that if you idolize either someone or something, it's on this pedestal, and it's something that maybe is a bit out of touch, out of reach for you. But if there's something that's normal for you, well, then all of a sudden it's normal. Of course I can do that.
Yeah.
So expanding that sphere of influence to make things like this normal, make property investing normal, growing your portfolio normal, or tapping into what you've already got as a network, but bringing more normality to it. Is that really the benefit to expanding that sphere of influence, or not even expanding, but having that positive sphere of influence of other investors? Because now it's just like, well, this is just what we do.
I think it's a mix, man. I definitely think that's a huge part of it. But I think the other part of it is it will keep you pushing. So I think when it's solo, it can be hard to kind of know. And I think having that, it's like all of you kind of doing it together sort of thing. It's like you might end up at the top and you might be the one that keeps pushing sort of thing, but you also have guys trying to catch you behind you, which will probably keep trying to push you as well. Or you might have people who are in front of you that you can talk to. And then there'll be people who are below you that you might spitball ideas with, and they may ask you questions. And I feel like when you build this out, and this is what we've really witnessed, as you sort of build this out, it's just almost like you kind of create almost like your own little hub and sort of community within it. Whether you're using BAs or you're trying to do it yourself or whatever it is, you're just kind of creating this little ecosystem that you can bounce ideas off within each other and help keep you pushing forward. Because the most important thing, and when I really look at this number and creating that millionaire sort of mindset, it's not overnight. Success in property and creating $1 million in property doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with one deal. Typically, it takes a few deals and it takes a few years to kind of get through. So what you want to do is kind of, especially if you can get people around you can start doing this with for a few years. And obviously friends and family, that's the strongest one. If you can tap into people who are already there, it can be super, super powerful.
Is any other benefit to really strengthening that network apart from, or that circle of influence, apart from what we've just discussed?
Man, I think it just keeps you moving forward.
Is there anyone you're chasing?
Anyone I'm chasing?
Yeah. You don't have to give names. I'm just curious if there's someone that's above you right now that you're like, I'm coming for you.
Not really, man. I knowing like where my portfolio is at the moment, the only person that sort of comes to mind for me is kind of like a Harry Triggerpoff, who's like 6,000 apartments, but it's a very, very different model to what I'm doing. Man, I have very clear goals with what I'm chasing, and I'm just getting after that. I'm just chasing that. I don't compare myself so much to other people. And this is another huge part of it, man. This is probably actually a great point as well on that front, but probably wouldn't go so much as comparing yourself too much against other people. Worry about your own journey and what you're capable of personally. I think it was a few really big shifts in my life have been when I've focused more on that rather than negatives or trying to pull anyone down or anything like that who might be in front of me. I'm more focused on, well, maybe what are those guys doing? What are those guys doing correctly that maybe I could implement for myself? And yeah, man, so that's the way I look at it from that side. I mean, it kind of segues nicely into a point that I was kind of thinking of, was playing on my mind before when you were talking as well. Within my circle of influence and what kind of a big shift, the big trajectory shift that I had probably around about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was I met a couple of boys that were, man, they were just super positive guys. And they were people who like I potentially could have competed with like a little bit in business. And they were also investors. And I kind of came from like a family and a mindset where like you kept everything to yourself and you just like, you really like, who's doing better than you. And you just like, didn't necessarily be happy for them, if that makes sense. Came from a bit more of a negative sort of mindseted family. And man, it was funny because when I spent more time around these guys, they were just so positive. And like, it took me a little bit to open up and tell them what I'd done in property. And then when I did, they were like, man, that is wild. And I was in front of them, only by a couple of properties at the time. But I was in front of them and they're like, man, that's crazy. I can't believe you've done it. And like, they knew I was a lower income earner as well. And they're like, and especially like, man, you're making like half of us and yet your portfolio is like bigger than us. And man, they just saw it as like a positive. And then they were like asking me questions about, like, how did you do this? How did you do that? And it was like genuinely positive. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like conniving, let's get as much information out of this guy as possible and then kick him to the curb. It was a genuine like interest in it and appreciation for what I'd done as well.
They're actually happy for you.
Man, it was crazy. And it literally changed a lot of things in my mind when I realized it, because it felt wrong to be anything but that back to them. So then when they started doing developments, like other developments that they were doing and even looking at their portfolio, you couldn't help but do it in a really positive way. And I think like where I'm going with this is, you got to be really careful on the flip side of that, of the people who bring negativity into your circle.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be family. Sometimes it could be a brother or a sister or a friend, who bring that negativity and try and pull you back. And you have to be really, really careful of this, because as you're trying to build out the portfolio, you are 100% going to cop some people that are like this. And man, you have to like learn to distance yourself from it. And maybe it's just, you don't even talk about property with them. That might be that one person that you don't even send the podcast to, or maybe you try it. You send them that one, and then if it's probably not going to be received the best. And then if it's not received the best, whatever, you just leave it from there. But what I found was that I really started to outgrow these people, and I've actually seen it happen heaps. When I've kind of shared that story before, I've had heaps of people kind of say the same thing to me, that they kind of started to outgrow these negative people, and they almost gave them a bit of an ultimatum, like, you can either change with me and try and grow them and kind of be more positive on that, in that sense, or just as an absolute minimum, don't bring the negativity around me anymore, because I'm just working with positive people. I don't want the negativity around me. And then obviously the extreme of that is effectively having to cut them as well. But in life, sometimes that's what has to be done to go to that next level of growth. And I think that's where that circle of influence, it's so important, because if you allow those negative people to stay in and around you, I guarantee you, it doesn't matter how close you once were with that person, or how close you might still be with them, they will negatively impact your mindset, which will negatively impact your journey over time.
What do you think about just saying people? people that are always like, they'll say something and they'll be like, oh, I'm just saying. It's something that I've realized that it's a real subtle negative person to have around because they're never like blatantly boom, boom, boom. But it's like they'll usually say something pretty bad, off-putting. It's, oh, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, man, they're normally the worst, right? Because it's kind of like the sly negativity because it will like a lot of people won't confront that. And I was like that back in the day as well. I kind of would avoid confronting that because I'm like, oh, like
But they're just saying.
They're just saying, right?
Yeah.
But so often that's what will actually play in the back of your mind and seed that doubt like further along the journey as well. So, yeah, man, for me, it's they're you pull them up on it. For one, pull them up on it. They keep doing it. Just cut them. Like, which sounds harsh and which sounds hard to do. The easiest way is pull them up on it and actually call them out on it and just go, "No, man, you're not just saying because like you're just saying it all the time. So can you stop saying? Because I don't want to hear that stuff anymore. I'm trying to keep the negativity out of it. Because, man, it sounds like a simple thing, or it even sounds like a little bit of a fugazi. You know what I mean? Like a bit airy fairy or whatever. But the amount of growth you will have when you push negativity out and you just surround yourself with a circle of influence that's positive, man, game changer. Absolute game changer.
It's a skill too. How long can you actually keep a positive mindset for? And if you think it is like fugazi to use your word,
yeah.
and you're like, okay, try it. Test yourself. Can you actually do it for a day, a week, a month? How long can you actually stay positive for? But I'm curious to see, and it's probably different for you because you've got a pretty big sphere of influence yourself and you're in the public figure now as well. But if you were to try and make a new friend that has this same kind of mindset, let's say you've tested the immediate circle and they're not quite where you want them to be. Making friends as a guy or a girl in your 30s, where do you go?
Yeah, for sure.
Any ideas or anything you've heard from this like group of people, 317 odd, that is something that other people could maybe go, yeah, I could do that?
Probably the easiest way is when you're actually in a social setting with someone, with new people, right? So like the biggest and probably the easiest one I've ever seen is like you're in a social setting with someone and you just kind of see where the way conversation turns. We're in Australia. We all seem to love to talk about property. It always seems to come up at a party or at a barbecue or whatever. You see who starts to kind of talk about this stuff and then who almost is on that same vein as you, right?
Okay, yeah.
Or even if they're just talking about property and then you bring up the podcast or you bring up a podcast or have you ever listened to this or that or whatever, and they may have, they may not. It's actually crazy the amount of people that say this to me and then they go, I mentioned the Scouting Australia podcast, and they go, holy shit, no way, I listen to that. Random as like all of that, and audiences of Pizza and Property would be exactly the same. They'd mention it because you got a bloody big audience, mate. And the amount of people that would say it, and then other people who they probably didn't even know also listen to it. And it was crazy the amount of times that we'd have guys literally in the same circle and they'd all be listening, but no one had spoken to each other about it. And then they, you know what I mean? And then they they find out they're all bloody listening to it and start talking about it. So it's funny, man. In that social setting, I'd be dropping that sort of stuff. Whatever your favorite podcast is that you listen to out there, you know, I'd be kind of dropping that. And then if they haven't, but they're keenly talking about property, go, mate, what's your number? I'm going to flick you this thing. Let me know what you think. And then it's you're either potentially going to be on the same vein and the same vein of thinking and potentially have the same interests, or you're not. And it's all good because there's going to be someone that'll click with. If you do that enough times, you're going to have someone that's going to click with. It's going to go, oh man, that's so mad. And you don't need a million people around you that love property. You have a couple of people.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
You got 2 or 3 people around you that you can talk to about real estate.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
A funny one is what I've heard a lot of people doing with their partners, and both blokes and girls will do this.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, you're not listening to that podcast again, right? The partner. But then what they'll do is they'll listen to all the podcasts and they'll go, I really like that one, and I know my partner's really going to like it. So then they'll pick them up in the car and they'll leave it at like a really good point in the potty just before they pick them up. And they'll pick them up like, oh, look, I know you don't like the potty, but I'm just almost finished this ep. There's a really good point. Can I just finish listening to this? And they'll play that 10 minutes that's like super relevant to them. And then they get hooked. They're like, oh, this is mad. And they start listening to it. And man, I've had so many couples have said that to me about doing that together, and both guys and girls doing it with obviously the opposite partner. And yeah, man. And then they may not listen to all of them, but then they'll get into it and they might be able to start talking about it, and it starts to grow. Because if anyone's going to be the closest person of your circle of influence on this thing, it's going to be your partner.
So grow your circle of influence, make sure it stays positive, make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded, potentially further ahead than you are. Start with who you already know, then maybe try and push it to a little bit further along. And you can start by, like you're saying, flicking an episode, going, hey man, what are you? Like, test the waters.
100%.
Is there anything else on number one that we need to cover off before we go to number two?
When there's that negativity side of things, just be very careful of who you leave in there and for how long, because it can affect you more than you realize.
All right, so it's not just about creating the positive circle. It's also about making sure that like the negativity is like drained out.
Try and eliminate it as much as possible. Yeah, for sure.
What's number two on the list, man?
Number two on the list, solutions-based thinking. This is one of the things where I see people either grow or they stall. They either come up with ideas to solve problems, which is super important, or they don't, and they kind of allow it to consume them, and they don't grow past this. This is almost like one of those growth levels, those growth trajectory sort of things. It's kind of like when you play video games, right? And you play the boss, your boss level. You play the boss enough times, you're going to beat him, and then you go to that new level and you figured out how to beat him. It's the same when you're kind of in property and as you're going through and as you're dealing with different things. The more things that you tackle and you tackle head on and you try and think about it with a solutions-based thinking, the more things you're going to work past. And then the next time something comes up that like the majority of people, maybe you a year ago, wouldn't have been able to deal with, you're going to be like, oh, no, we'll just do it like this. Or, well, what if we tried this? The more often you go through and you try and tackle everything with solutions-based thinking, the more things you're going to be able to overcome and grow.
Can you think of a time where you were on a call and that penny dropped? Because I feel like a lot of people have solution-based thinking as a skill set, but it doesn't always apply to like every area of life. You might be a busy mum spinning a whole bunch of plates and you've got to be a solution thinker to like just move the household forward, right? But then you put someone in a setting that they're not comfortable with. Maybe they go back to like, oh, actually, I don't know about this. I'm just going to do nothing because that feels safe. Twisting that and sort of applying that skill set into property. Can you think of a time where you've kind of seen the penny drop in someone or helped the penny drop?
Man, probably the biggest thing I'm thinking of would come to things like building and pests. You know what I mean? Where you might get someone or like a property manager or a building and pest inspector might go through a property as you're buying it and they're like, oh, it's stuffed. You need a whole new bathroom. And you're like, oh, and then you can't negotiate the difference, right? Let's say if you're trying to do this yourself or even a BA out there trying to do whatever. And then what's actually the issue? Okay, so let's find out what the issue is, right? The problem and the issue. Because if you give a property manager free reign, they're going to fix everything to the absolute best, like the top of the ability, because then it's going to make their job easier to rent to a really good tenant. And it's the easiest thing for them as well, right? Instead of that, okay, what's actually wrong with it? Oh, well, there's water ingress, it's going into the room behind, blah, blah, blah. Okay, no worries. So the shower's leaking. Yes. What else is wrong in the bathroom? Oh, it's like the shower, it's going into the back of you got all this. Okay, so can we replace the shower? Can we re-waterproof the shower, regrout, retile, everything from that? Oh yeah, you could probably get away with that. This is where I'm talking about the most basic thing that comes into my mind is scenarios like that, where people blow things out of the water. And this is where you have to be really careful. Again, circle of influence. How much do you trust your property manager to bring you the highest and best use, renovation or fix in your portfolio, in your job? If you don't have multiple properties with them or you haven't dealt with them for quite a while, you may not understand how they think. And they may just think, well, what would I do in my own home? I would renovate the bathroom and I would make it really nice and go through all this. But ultimately, if we're in this as an investor, we just want to get this thing through. We don't want to spend the extra 15 grand. Maybe we just want to spend the 2 grand, rectify it. Like what is literally potentially the lowest cost solution that still solves the problem.
Yeah, if you're not doing a reval for an equity uplift, what's the point?
If you're taking it as a market, if you're going to hold it for another 5 years, whatever. Yeah. If this just gets me through for now, if I'm going to do a whole reno, I'll do the reno at the end when I'm potentially about to sell and get top dollar for it.
Yeah.
So it literally just things like that. It comes in so many different shapes and sizes, especially obviously from a renovations perspective. But solutions-based thinking, man, it literally comes across almost everything in a portfolio and building a portfolio. If you don't go in with the solutions-based thinking, man, you're going to get stuck very, very early in the journey.
Do you find that it's something that when you develop more of a skill set, like maybe people that you've dealt with that are at property number 1 don't have it as much as maybe property number 3 or 4?
Of course.
Because it's like, well, I've seen this before. I know this. Like,
it depends on where they're coming from. So a lot of people will come from a specific background or field or upbringing or something like that allows them to, they might already know how to deal with a couple of things. But if we're talking about almost everyone at an even keel, right, and they're starting at exactly the same, yes, your person that's 4 or 5 properties in are undoubtedly going to be better than your person just starting out because they should have been through a few things on the way through. And to get to 4 or 5 properties, it's also no mean feat. Like unless you're on a really big income, borrowing's no issues and deposits are no issues.
Pretty good achievement.
100%. 4 or 5 properties for the average income earner starting with an average deposit, man, that's a really good achievement. So they would have gone through a few things to get to that point as well. So 100%. And this is the biggest thing. The longer you stick at this thing, the better you're going to get at it. The more solutions focused you are naturally going to become as well. But I think the reason why I put it in there and why I think it's super important is because we're talking about creating millionaires. And again, as I said, it's very hard to become a millionaire from I mean, 1 or 2 properties over the last few years. Maybe you get out of the 2, right? But like it's harder. Realistically, you're probably wanting to get a 3 or 4 properties portfolio and it go through a full cycle to hit $1 million net equity. You're going to have to wade through a bit of shit to get to that point. And you're going to have to go through it. And really what you want to do is you want to make sure you continue accumulating and you keep that journey going. Because as soon as you stop, the less you're going to have, right? And the more that you keep going, keep pushing it and keep moving it forward, the easier it's going to get. And the more that those wins are going to compound, but also the more that solutions-based thinking is going to compound, you're just going to get better and better at it.
I don't know if this is one of the points on your list, but what do you think about that self-story as well? Like the deserving, like this is who I am, this isn't who I am, this is good enough for me, this isn't good enough. Do you see that as a common factor? Like,
No.
Because I kind of feel this like with the solutions-based thinking, just the way that you approach everything. It's like, what's that saying? It's like, it's not necessarily what's happening, it's the lens that you view it through that sort of changes everything.
Interesting.
But you're already saying that that's not really something that you see?
The funny thing is, like, on the upfront, I definitely don't see it that much. Like, when people come through to me and they're strategizing things, it's not like I have to, like, train people that much in terms of, or like, you know, really help them that much on that front. Because most people are pretty positive. It's only when things pop up that they've got to really lean into this, to consciously do it, to make sure they can get past it.
Okay.
There's some ridiculous statistic of people that sell out in the first 12 months. It's some ridiculous statistic of people that sell out of investment properties in Australia in the first 12 months. It's because they can't get over it. They can't get through the first 6 months of ownership, something is going to come up. Does not matter what property you buy, something is going to come up in the first 6 months of ownership. Whether you built it or whether it was a 10-year-old rental or a 20-year-old primary residence, something's going to come up. And you just have to, you just got to accept it. It's going to come up on every single deal. So you just got to accept it and just always be looking at, okay, how am I going to solve it? So, create the solution around this. This is how I grow. Just keep looking at it as that. You probably notice almost all this stuff I talk about here. It's almost always about what is the positive way I can look at this thing. Before I kick the wall and bash the door in or do whatever, before I do all that, how do I actually get through this? And sometimes maybe you do need to go in a dark room and scream and oh, how did this happen? Woe unto me, all the rest of it. But ultimately, that's not going to fix anything. That is not going to fix a single thing. The only way you're going to fix anything is by creating a solution. And ultimately, a property manager getting paid 60 or 70 grand a year does not really have in their best interest to look for the highest and best use of it. If you're making, let's say you buy a great deal and you make 10, 20% more worth of growth that year, you might be talking 50, 100, $200,000 worth of growth in a year. It is in your best interest to figure out how to create solutions around this thing so you can keep moving forward and not get stuck and not get shocked into not being able to do it.
So 317 people, and they all have this in common?
Definitely not. Absolutely not.
Okay, should it be on the list then?
I think what's really important to note is 317 millionaires is 317 completely different personalities.
Yeah.
And people are going to start with so much different levels of this, right? I think what it probably is it's not what they all had in common from the start, but it's what they probably all had at the end.
Yeah, okay.
Because it takes time to learn this sort of thing and become better at it and create and grow these skill sets. No one's born a god at investing or a god at, becoming the best athlete in the world and all the rest of this sort of stuff. There's always trials and tribulations and grit and perseverance that you have to push through these different things and learn these different things. No one's born with all the knowledge in their mind, solutions-based thinking. There's no way that they all can. But by the time they get through it, and this is the thing that I almost promise people, you go through this thing and you go do 3, 4, 5 deals and you ride through 5 years of ownership of 5 properties, you're going to change as a person. You're going to become a lot stronger. You're going to have more grit, perseverance, and you've got solutions-based thinking is gonna it should become a really, really high character trait that you have within you. Because the more you do this stuff, the more stuff's gonna get thrown at you. But the really cool thing here, man, is the easier it gets.
So problems thrown at you now is just like reflex?
Yeah.
Do this, and this.
Yeah. It depends. If I don't know the answer to it, the person who brought it to me, okay, how do we fix that? Well, I don't know. Okay, who else have you asked? Ask anyone. Okay, go ask these people first and bring it back to me with the solution. And if they don't have the solution, it's okay, no worries. Now I'll spitball the idea. And that's the delegation. And that's almost what a lot of people should do from a property manager perspective. Property manager brings me a problem and they don't have a solution. I think when we jumped on about this when I was up here last, I got a little bit angry about this because it was
You did. There were a few comments about that.
there was a property manager who just brought me something without solutions.
Yep.
And it's man, I understand you don't get paid, it's not your property, okay? But you are managing it and you're bringing me a problem. In my opinion, I'm paying you to also bring me a solution. I'm happy to work on a solution with you, but you haven't brought me anything.
Yeah.
Bring me some solutions first. Like, what's a solution? Okay. Well, have you had it quoted? No. Well, obviously it needs to be repaired. So could you please get it quoted? And I would like 2 quotes. And then you get them, they come back in, and then you can get and you can work through this thing. And what you find is that the more you do this, the better you get at it. And the more that you work with that one person, the more they're going to realize, oh, no, hang on a sec. I'm taking it to Sam. What's the first thing he's going to ask me? What's the solution? Where's the quote? I understand this needs to get fixed. Let's have some quotes so we can make a quick decisive action on it.
I've never even thought of doing that with PMs. We've actually got a rule in the company now that if there's a problem, before you call me up and say, hey, Todd, here's the problem, I want you to think of 2 different solutions. Then give me the problem, tell me your 2 solutions, and then tell me which one you think is better and why. And because I think it trains people to be more accountable, more like problem solve. Like, I've never thought of doing that with a PM.
So you're literally telling me that you're training all your staff to be solutions-based thinking.
Yeah.
There you go. that's why it's on the list.
They're not millionaires yet. Yeah.
Well, it's because they're working your business instead of being property investors. But you see, like and the crazy thing is, within 12 months of them doing that, they're going to know how to solve most of the things that's within their role.
Yeah.
And you think about it, you do that for 5 years across, 5-10 property portfolio, you're going to become really, really good at solving problems. And that's why it's not what they all have, especially not at the start. Maybe 17 of the 317 started with it. The other 300 earned it by the end. And I think there's something really cool about earning traits like this. Because like I said before, most people aren't born with this stuff. They have to grow into it and then earn it, become it.
There's a saying about that. Like, it's not about the journey of making your first million. It's about the journey of who you become to be the person that can make $1 million. It's
not the $1 million. It's the journey that made it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm butchering that. That is actually an elegant quote out there somewhere.
There's a succinct version, but you just had the Toddy Sloan version.
Exactly. Number 3 on the list, man.
Sacrifice. Being willing to sacrifice.
This is the one that nobody wants, but I think everyone needs to do. I'm actually working on something at the moment that I'm calling the sacrifice slingshot.
Okay.
I'm a very visual person, as you know. You and I have known each other for a while. I look at it as like the harder you pull back, the harder it gets. But the harder you pull back, the further it's going to fling you forward. And I know that sacrifice is such a huge part of this.
Yep.
How much sacrifice do you think is necessary to actually put in? And what have you seen as far as the common traits between these people?
We'll come back to what I've seen at the end.
Okay.
How important is it? That was the first part of it. Yeah. I think how important comes down to the individual and their scenario. So if the individual is like where I started from, really low income earner, and property is their vehicle to get out of the rat race and their vehicle to retire themselves, it is the most important thing in the whole thing. Because if you don't sacrifice, you'll never even start.
Okay.
So sacrifice is huge if that's your scenario.
So you're talking about from like a savings perspective, just even getting the deposit together.
100%. Even getting the deposit for the second one. Because chances of and this does happen, right? But chances of the first deal that you buy funds you into your second deal within 6 months. It's not always going to happen, right? So a lot of the time you're probably going to have to chip in another deposit. And so if I look at myself from 20 to 27, I didn't travel 7 years. And I'm not saying people have to do that. Like I was it was my vehicle. I was absolutely obsessed with doing it. But I didn't travel. And I worked 2-3 jobs at a time, all the time. And it was my life and it was my dedication through that piece and through that journey. But it was okay. Like I loved it. I wanted to do it. My idea of a holiday was to take 2 weeks off and go and renovate one of my properties interstate. That was my idea of a holiday. But that was my sacrifice because I didn't have all these other things. I didn't finish high school. I didn't have a uni degree. I didn't have a trade, all these sorts of things. That was what I had to do. That was the sacrifice piece that I knew I had to make. And different people will be at different levels. But someone making 50 grand a year, someone making 100 grand a year, someone making 2, 3, 500 grand a year. What I've found is that most people that make whatever people make, they seem to live that lifestyle.
Yeah, okay.
So it's almost extremely relevant regardless of where you are. Unless you're putting away 100, 200 grand a year, you're probably going to need to do a couple of years of sacrifice to get started. Unless you already have a nice big chunk of equity or whatever to start with. But ultimately, if you don't have that foot in the door already, sacrifice is going to come in and be a big part of it.
And chances are, if you already do, you probably sacrificed at an earlier stage to get that first chunk of equity.
Yeah, 100%. But willing to sacrifice. If we're talking about what they've all had pretty much across the board, they've all been willing to do it at some point in their lives, whether it was at the start or whether it's at whatever point in their journey to create this and kick this thing off and get it going.
I don't know if this is off topic, but it feels like the right thing to say, so let's run with it. But Bianca and I were talking about this actually literally just last night, and we were talking about what I would call the immigrant advantage. When you meet people, and I've had so many people on the show, they've come from countries that have like hard lives.
Yep.
Like we think people on the bottom rungs are hard here. Nothing compared to what these people have gone through. And it feels like it's, again, kind of comes back to that lens. We look at stuff and we're complaining because we're refinancing at the moment. And we were like, oh, they want more paperwork. Oh, they want this. Oh, they want that. Haven't we done all this? And then I said to B, I'm like, they're giving us millions of dollars, right? Like, are we really, like, we could not do this without the bank.
Yeah.
Are we really complaining? And it kind of got me thinking about all of the different things in life that we kind of complain about because we're so used to it being a certain way. And it's like, as soon as you step outside of that comfort zone, which people immigrating to Australia, if they've really had a tough life, they look at so many of the things, the sacrifice element, and it's like, was that all I need to do? Yeah, done.
Easy, done.
Yeah.
Can I tell you something funny? I have noticed, so every month on Scouting Show podcast, we do an investor story.
Yep.
Almost every single one worked as a kid, like their parents, whether they had a family business or whether their parents just made them go and get work as soon as they were 13 and 9 months or whatever the hell the age was back in the day, or they paid them $20 on the weekend to go sweep out the garage and clean the sheds. They learned very early that work was a huge part of it. That was a huge part of life. It wasn't just a given that you were going to make money one day. You had to earn money from a very, very young age. And man, I look at myself when I was in school and my dad used to give me $30 on a Sunday and I'd go and I'd clean out the sheds for like 4 or 5 hours or whatever. And this was, we had the rabbit farm and then we had the feed mills and everything. And I'd go clean the sheds and clean it and get $30. And like so often I look at these kids, like when they come through, as kids, they had that kind of, it's like almost like child labor style things where you get paid almost nothing. But it's like what you actually got paid was a work ethic. That's what you earned. You didn't earn as much money maybe, but like you just had instilled from you a very, very young age this work ethic, and it's just something that you do. And I kind of very much look at that as like these guys grafted so hard over there, but it built such a crazy work ethic and like expectancy that when they come over here, they're like, hang on, what? Hang on a sec, wait, it costs what to do this? Like, I get paid how much? You know what I mean? Like, the comparison to back home is crazy. And almost everyone that I have interviewed since I've started the podcast, they all had that same upbringing. I look at myself, it's literally exactly the same thing. I think it's such a crazy character trait to kind of have, and it comes from that side of things. So, man, I agree with you completely.
So, if someone's got that hardworking background, I feel like don't use that as I've had to work so hard. It's like, no, man, you've got a leg up. You've got this work ethic that so many people might not have. But for some people that don't have it,
I don't think the guys that have it don't, or the guys and girls, the people that have it, I don't think they actually see it as a bad thing. They might say, I had to do this or whatever. They're just like, I worked, like when I was a kid, I used to work on the farm or whatever. They say that's more the comment that comes rather than I had to do this.
Okay, so it's normalized.
100%.
Okay. I love the sacrifice side of things because it's not simple to stay consistent with, but it's easy. Like it's not some kind of a thing of like you need to run 100 meters in 9 seconds. It's not this skill that needs to really be developed.
Yep.
It's just to set the parameters. But I think if you start it wider and then try and sort of like narrow it down a little bit until you get to that comfort point. But is there any sort of, again, common traits that you've seen amongst all these people? That it's like they cut doing this, they worked overtime, what are the most common things that move the needle the most?
It always depends on the individual and the scenario. Actually, the thing that moves the most, if we were to really drill it down into creating millionaires, it's doing another deal. It's accumulation, which will feed into a couple of other points I've got coming up, but it's like, it's not stopping at that. You get paid direct correlation to what you work in a workforce, right? If you're working for someone else, you get paid compared to, or even if you're working in business, sales, whatever it is that you're doing, you get paid compared to output. Yep. The crazy thing about property is leverage. So it is a leveraged return. So think of, if you're borrowing at an 80% OVR, you're putting a 20% deposit in, you're putting 1/5 of the money in against that property. It's almost the equivalent. I've never actually thought about it like this, but it's almost the equivalent of you working and having 5x output because you're putting in that 1/5. And then you're getting, but I'm actually working 2, 3, 4, 5 hours here for my 1 hour of output because I put a 20% deposit in.
That's a good way of thinking of it.
I've never thought about it. It literally just popped into my head just then. But it's that leveraged return. I think because I've never thought about it against an actual work, against that worked output 1 hour. And I think when you look at it like that, but the craziest part is then when you pull that deposit out and then you go and put it into the second one, you've still only got, even if you've still got that just the one deposit, which was the 20%, and then you've stripped it out and put it in the next deal. Well, now you've actually got one working for you 10 times Because if it was a 20% on this one and then we've rolled it into the next one, let's say there's 5 bars, and think of it as a king size Snickers or something. It's not in 2, it's in 5.
Yeah.
And then we've pulled that one piece and put it into the next one, and we've got that 5 again because there's that single bar, that 20%.
Yeah, I'm picturing it.
And that leveraged return. And that's the beauty and the power of property. And if I really look at my journey and the way I drill it all the way back down, I put in as much as I could, but I didn't make that much. So it wasn't that much. It was always leveraged return from the bank. That was the beauty of it, the power of it.
It makes me think of, I watched this video of Mark Rober. I don't know if you...
Mark who?
Mark Rober. He's a YouTuber. A funny dude. He was like an old NASA scientist.
Yeah, right.
But he was talking about his YouTube channel, how he's actually now started this thing called Crunch Labs. And anyway, this is not a plug for Mark, but it was really cool. And one of the things he said was that the cool thing was if he now sells $100,000 worth of like the thing, he now looks at that as $500,000 that he's made, because he looks at it as the multiplier effect that it has on the valuation of the business.
Yeah, right.
And it kind of feels like you're saying the same sort of thing. It's that...
It is the same thing.
Yeah, the multiplier.
Yeah, for sure. And that's leverage. Leverage is the multiplier. And the craziest part of it is it's a multi-multiplier. You know what I mean? It's not just the one hit of it, because we can extract equity and go again. It's actually the craziest wealth builder there is, property, and the ability to leverage and really push hard from that perspective. So I think that's where, man, like, that initial sacrifice and the hard work from that perspective, when you can start playing that game, it's unmatched. You can't beat it.
That was the other part of the conversation last night, was like, we've made millions in property now. I was like, how would we have actually done this without the banks? How would we have actually done this without property?
Yeah, you can't do it.
I said, like, well, we're going to go down shares and like put our $20,000 a year into shares or whatever. Like, we'd still be okay.
Yeah.
But you're not coming anywhere close.
No, you're not getting the 5-pack king size Snickers.
Snickers.
If I throw one little thing on this as well, because I know you kind of are liking the stories on that side as well. I mean, I think about a young client of ours, Bailey, who actually, funnily enough, it's Morgan's brother, right?
Yeah.
But never given a leg up, never given money or anything from that perspective. And he would be 25 now, I think he is. And man, when we first, because I've been with Morgs now for 5 years, and when I first met him, he had just bought this brand new, it was a Ford Ranger, it was an FX4. It was like the one under the Wild Track back in the day.
That's an expensive car? Or?
It's like 55 grand, 55 grand, something like that. Took him 5 years to pay it off.
Mm-hmm.
Paid it off when he was pretty much 25. And we had this conversation when we were driving up to, it was funny, I was trying to find it was when I'd bought my Ferrari, right? But I was shopping around. I was trying to find the exact one that I wanted, and very limited stock at the time. Not that far after COVID, so we're kind of just heading around everywhere. And I was driving back from Ferrari Brisbane, and we're chatting on the way back in the car. And he goes, man, and this actually really feeds well into circle of influence as well. He goes, man, I was chatting with Kyle the other day, and we're at gym, and we're sitting outside gym. We just finished a session or whatever, and this guy drove into Lamborghini. And Kyle goes,
so who's Kyle?
He's his mate. He's his best mate. Okay. So sorry, yeah. So I was telling this story. So he was there at gym. They just finished a session. They're having a chat outside.
Yep.
Him and Kyle, and then this dude drives past in a Lamborghini. And Kyle goes, man, that'll never be us. I wish, man, but nah, that'll just never be us. And he just said it. And Bowles, because I've been getting up him about saying similar sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And I go, why not? I go, bro, we literally just we're driving back from Ferrari, man. Like, I'm shopping for a Ferrari at the moment. Like, when I first started this, man, I'm making $39,000 a year. If there's anyone that does not have a right or never had a right to buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, it's me. I'm literally shopping for one at the moment. You guys have this ridiculous scenario where you also like know someone that has like built this, so you can leverage off my experience. Like, if you want to chat, like, which we were chatting about it at the time, sort of thing. But I'm like, man, it's just like, it's such like a small-minded way of thinking to literally say that'll never be us. Why? There's no reason why it can't be anyone. The craziest thing about something like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, carry two good growth properties through a growth cycle, sell them off, pay a little bit of tax. There's a Ferrari in cash.
It's nuts when you think about it that way.
It's not that hard. It's part of it, but it's not crazy. It's not like you have to go and make it. Think of my 5x return, like the 5 hours on the one. That's what the property will do for you like by leveraging and being able to do that. Even if you just look at it purely from that essence, it's not the craziest thing in the world to be able to imagine buying a Ferrari in 5 years. If that was all you did, you bought 2 properties, right market, let them double, sell it off, go buy it with cash. That's literally all you would have to do. That's not that crazy, right? He went and told Kyle the same story because I got up him. Mm-hmm. And then on this drive back, and then Bal said, well, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. Cause like he had no money. I go, like, what do you got? How much you got in the bank? He's like, $8,000 or something, or $7,000 or something. I go, you can't do anything with that. I go, what else you got? I go, what about the ute? He goes, I just paid the ute off. I go, fucking sell it. He's like, man, I just paid it off. I go, how much is it worth? He goes, I'll probably sell it for like $50,000. I go, sell the ute. He's like, nah. And I go, that's why you'll never own a Ferrari. or you'll never own a Lamborghini because you're not willing to sacrifice and you're not willing to do what I did and what heaps of people that are like me and you and everything do. We're willing to drive around the old shitbox for 5 years, 10 years and build the portfolio and then buy that thing in cash. That's what we're willing to do. That's why you'll never own it. What do you think he did the next week?
Sold the ute.
Sold the ute. Guess how many properties he's bought in 12 months?
Did 2?
He just settled on his 3rd property.
What a weapon.
Guess how many properties Kyle's got?
0.
He's just about to buy his 3rd property. When Bailey
Kyle came around.
When Bailey sold the ute and bought his property, he goes, I'm doing that. Sold the ute. Now they're like 3 months apart. Kyle's just had a second reval. I literally posted his reel last night. Go have a look on the 20th of September. There's a reel on there. And I posted about Kyle. And he's just had the valuation done on his second deal. He's up like 120 grand in 3 months. He's pulling it out and buying he'll have his 3rd deal done by the end of the year. 3 deals in less than 12 months. He'll own over $1 million worth of property. He'll probably have, I don't know, $300,000 of equity or something. He could literally just carry that for the next 4 to 5 years and sell it. And then there's his Lamborghini that he never thought he'd be able to do. There's his Lamborghini in cash.
There's potentially even a second-hand older Lamborghini there in cash now.
Pretty much. But man, it's a crazy thing. And that's why like I think it's really cool to bring those 2 points together. Circle of influence, one from like me to Bailey, but then Bailey to Kyle, but then willing to sacrifice, both of them. They're 25. They both just spent 5 years paying off their ute. But then they realized like that's not actually, all right, it's a flex when you're 21, 22 that you got a $50,000 ute. When you get to 25, you realize that doesn't actually mean you are worth anything.
No one cares.
That exact example you gave before, what are most people's net worth at 30? It's 50 grand.
Yeah.
It's a wild track paid off. These boys have just 6x that return in less than 12 months. And I think, man, it's such a cool story and it's such like a really cool thing. And like, it humbles me, man. Like it's crazy that we can pass on this sort of thing and help people do these sorts of things. And, yeah, man, like the crazy thing, Bailey's story, I'm actually recording with him in a few weeks. His story is coming out in the podcast in October. He'll be the October investor story.
I'll listen to that one, man.
Yeah, man. But it's cool, you know, like, and I think the really cool thing about this is anyone can do it. You just have to be willing to do what 99% of people won't do. 99% of people wouldn't have sold that ute. And then if he doesn't sell it, the circle of influence doesn't impact Kyle to sell his ute. And they're literally changing like the whole trajectory of their friend circles. And then how many people do they impact that impacts? It's crazy, man. Love it. It's the best.
I like this is wrapped up in a nice story here because it's one thing to say sacrifice is good.
Yeah.
It's another to actually have an anecdote like this that's like one away that actually just really shows like 3 properties in now, and even not just Bailey, but Kyle, his friend that was like, we'll never own that, man.
Man.
It shows the power of it.
100%, bro. 100%.
Man, what's number 4 on the list?
Number 4 on the list, probably the biggest one.
Okay.
To become a millionaire. Oh, they're all pretty big. Grit and perseverance. This is probably multi-millionaire. Let's throw it in there. Multi-millionaire. You really, really want to become a multi-millionaire. You want to start building a big portfolio. Grit and perseverance is the biggest component.
Define grit and perseverance in your own words.
The ability to keep pushing when things keep getting thrown at you. So not be held back, not get held down.
How is it different to being solution-based?
Because solutions-based is creating solutions to things that pop up that need to be fixed.
Okay.
Grit and perseverance is just keeping on doing it.
So even if the mud keeps getting thrown, you just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Solutions-based thinking is great. If you don't have grit, at a certain point, you probably get worn down before it becomes second nature.
Yep. Okay. And you reckon you're born with it? Or do you reckon it's something that's made into people? Like, again, going back to, you said 17 sort of had it, the other 300 had to learn it. Similar?
Yes. Some people would create it from, or would be bred into them through their upbringing. Anyone that's done well in sports, I think should have a level of it as well, especially if they've gone to a decent level, because you kind of like, you need to push through a lot of the time to be able to do it. But it doesn't mean they had it at a really high level. They might just have it. And you might need to hone it and work on it. And it's literally a thing that's just like working and honing on it for me. For me, it wasn't second nature, but it was just something that it was my only avenue. I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have degree, trade, finish high school, all this sort of thing. I didn't have those things. So I didn't have a plan B. So for a lot of people, like, you will consciously have to push through this stuff. But the more you do it, and this really does tie in closely with solutions-based thinking as well. But the grit and perseverance is to be able to keep doing it. Because there's a certain point where, however solutions-based thinking you are, there's a certain point where you'll just get over it.
Yeah.
But when you have the grit and perseverance, that's what allows you to keep doing it. And that's why I said this is like probably the most important character trait of a multimillionaire. and a serious property owner, we start talking like your top 1% of property investors, this is probably the most important trait.
Burn the boats is what I'm hearing. If you maybe don't have grit and perseverance, you're familiar with that fable?
It's Ani, yeah.
I think it was actually Sun Tzu. It was like an art of war thing.
Oh, okay.
But apparently it's a fable that's not even true. But
Okay.
it was like this Chinese emperor warrior back in the day, and they went to this island to take it over, and then he was the one that went back and burnt the boat.
So they couldn't, the only thing they could do was win or die.
That was it.
Yeah.
If someone's trying to improve grit, do you think maybe having a plan B, a plan C, and this sounds like very risky territory as far as advice is concerned, but if there was full commitment and the boats were burned, do you think that's really what's needed sometimes to develop it?
So this is where it comes down to the individual and probably where they're at, because it's kind of going down a bit of a risky path in terms of what we're talking about here. It's almost like that plan B is almost like that. It's so logical that it has room for error in terms of like room for taking backward steps, if that makes sense. Right? Having those plan Bs. Well, this is the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
You burn the boats, there's no plan B. You can't take backward steps. You've got to keep going forward.
Yeah.
Where some people will struggle with this is if they have already got other things. Things like primary residences, things like big share portfolios, those sorts of things as well. Like my idea, my thoughts of it is like realistically when I'm thinking about it, it's just like you just keep pushing forward. Like there's no, everything goes into this. Like that's what I had to do. That's what I did. So I think it really depends on where someone starts with, but it's just making it work. But I think it's kind of like a double-edged sort of thing there, because it's literally just like, almost all these things, it's just being conscious of it. Because self-consciously, we all want to quit. Almost everyone wants to quit.
Subconsciously or self-consciously?
Sorry, subconsciously.
Subconsciously.
It was like this morning when you asked me about the cold shower. Like, man, every morning I go to jump in and I'm like, I'll just make the coffee first. I'll just go stretch. You know what I mean? Like subconsciously, you avoid doing it first thing all the time. You know what I mean? Like you kind of let other things come into it. And this is one of those things where like almost an extra bit of willpower for you, now that you've mentioned it to me, will be if every morning, even when you go, oh, no, maybe I'll go on, no, hang on, no, I won't, because I'm going to break myself that little bit further and I'm going to do it first thing.
You can just run in, like stop making sure my underpants are perfectly folded.
Probably. But this is the thing, man. Like I think it depends on where people come from. But when you really, really want to succeed at this stuff, that's where like, if it's your only option, man, if everything else is done, if it is what you're supposed to do, I think this is where I just kept going and going and going. And I got hit with roadblocks and I flew really close to the sun with cash flows and with deposits and all the rest of sort of stuff. But it's made it work. And I think it's one of those things. This is what I'm saying. Subconsciously, you will try and shy away from this stuff. And subconsciously, like these things, like the grit and perseverance, you need that when times are tough, right? You don't need grit and perseverance when times are good. No. And so subconsciously, we all like kind of retract a bit from the hard things that we have to do. Mm-hmm. It's almost like just consciously going, no, I have to do this. And I have to, and that's at all of these things. That's at sacrifice. That's at solutions-based thinking. That's at circle of influence. Circle of influence, man, how hard do you think it is cutting someone that you might have known for 20 years that's a massive negative influence in your life? You can't subconsciously cut that person. You will literally have to apply yourself to consciously get rid of, or try and change that person, or then cut that person. And I think that's where making these constant conscious decisions, that's what builds this.
So the cold shower thing, I want your thoughts on this.
You're defending yourself again.
No. The whole reason I do it is because I hate it, and I don't like it. It was even when I was in Europe in the winter, I committed to it every single day this year. I've done it, and I do it because and thank you. But the reason I do it is because I'm trying to actually strengthen that part of myself. Yeah. That part that goes, oh, no, it's all right. Just do that tomorrow. This is a way of the first thing I do in the morning is something I don't want to do. Yeah. So when that comes up later, I'm far less likely to go, yeah, I'll just have a packet of Doritos. It's like, no, do the thing you're supposed to do. Yeah. Do you subscribe to that kind of theory, or do you just look at it and be like, nah, bro, it's a cold shower. It's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, man. I think if you're always trying to push yourself with everything in life, I mean, there's the old saying, right? How you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to succeed at everything, if you're trying to succeed at one thing in your life, but then you're letting everything else be average, you're not going to be a beast across the board. Like there's going to be slippage. And if there's slippage somewhere, it's going to be slippage. Like you're going to cop slippage everywhere. So I think, man, that's why myself, like I try and stay as disciplined as I can with the training every day. Because I know if I don't train, I'll slip for the rest of the day. I'll be average. And then I may not even feel like it tomorrow because I may have slipped. It's the same as you. If you let one day pass, the next day you're probably going to be like, oh, or you maybe do it the next day and then you're like, I skipped the day the other day. You know what I mean? Like it's like you start to, like that doubt starts to weed its way in. And yeah, man, that's why like we're constantly got to battle against ourselves with these things because the human brain is wired to take the easiest option. Survival instincts. Like what's easy? What what do I not put myself under duress for?
Yeah, but that's not what helps you grow.
No.
Pressure is what makes diamonds. All right, so grit. If someone wants to improve this, they should be putting themselves in those situations, those pressure situations. Maybe on small scales, like don't actually burn the boats, don't burn your house down and be like, "Well, I'm going to go again.
I'm going to jail for arson, but yeah,
success." But put yourself in situations that you can get used to this.
Yeah.
You're expanding your circle of influence to positive people. You're cutting the negatives.
Yeah.
Then we're looking at sacrifice, and you're also continuously solutions-based. We're up to the fifth and final common factor. What is number 5?
it's taking action.
Action.
Yeah, it's always like I mean, you can do all the other things, but unless you take action, take continued action, it's all going to be for nothing. You know,
What do you think is the most common thing that prevents people from actually taking action?
indecisiveness, not actually knowing what they're doing. What would you probably hear about this a lot as well? What's the biggest thing you hear?
Ironically and humorously, I want to say I'm not sure just because you said indecisiveness. But
Is it indecisiveness?
No, I was being indecisive.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Smart ass.
The inaction side of things, it's about, for me, what I hear is the fear of making the wrong choice.
Okay.
And it's why a favorite quote, I've got a lot of favorite quotes.
You got heaps, right? I swear there's like 6 favorite quotes in this
Yeah,
episode.
probably. I think it was an Obama one actually.
Okay.
And it was like that indecision costs more than the wrong decision. I think that's so true.
Yeah.
It's like, even if like,
I think I was like Bezos or something. I heard. No, I
Possibly.
literally, I think I saw it the other day. I literally saw that one like a couple of days ago.
have you seen his movie?
No.
For the richest guy in the world, it is a bad film.
Really?
Yeah, I watched it on the plane not long ago. Anyway, that's a side note. Even if you look at like, if you bought 3 properties and they were kind of okay, and you did that like 10 years ago, you're still better off doing that than doing none.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, and that's not an advocate of buying average properties, but
But you know what though? It feeds into everything we've spoken about here. Because for one, you took action to start with, right? So you bought the 3 properties. You would have had to have had a level of grit and perseverance because you've owned them for 10 years.
Yep.
You don't own property for 10 years and then not
the air conditioner's broken.
Yeah,
Something's
but
happened.
man, even if the property did nothing for the first 7 years, like that's perseverance of staying through it during that period of time as well. And that's the thing. The key point there in terms of what you said was the 10 years. In 10 years, you would have become a millionaire, and that's what the point of this thing is. And like, okay, you may not have started the best, and maybe you were a bit haphazard and went everywhere, but like a lot of these other things, you probably had to develop over time to now land at being a millionaire. Even if that millionaire ability or that millionaire status or in terms of equity might have only happened in the last few years. A lot of these things worked into each other and probably molded you a little bit over those last 10 years to then allow you to have now hit that point.
Do you find then when you're talking to people that are in the inaction mode,
Yes.
what do you find gets them going the most from your influence? Or do you leave it and kind of go, nah, you got to fix that yourself because otherwise I'm pushing you into doing something?
Nah, like we definitely help lead people along because it's probably the biggest thing is like lack of direction, lack of knowledge where they're going, and that indecisiveness. So what most people would come to us for is, for one, strategic game plan of what we're actually going to go out there and do, put them in the right market, and then select the correct property at the right price in that location. So once you take all that out of it, that is probably like 50% of people just need that. Then the other 50% probably want the best deals that they potentially don't think they can do. But like 50 to 70% of people, they want to be led down the correct path, not make a mistake, and then buy the right property for the right price in that location. And then if you do it and you take care of your fee on the back end of it as well, where literally is the exposure or the risk in going down that avenue? And that's where we find so many people come to us being like, we just don't want to make those mistakes, and we want to put in the hands of a professional that can help us with that. So then, if I was to go, no, like we're not going to help you with that, you need to be 100% sure of yourself. It's like, man, especially at the start of the journey, no one, like it's very, very few people that are 100% sure of themselves. Especially like the majority of people that we work with is probably realistically like 20, 30s, and 40s, but especially the 20 to 30-year-old groups who maybe have never owned property in their lives. They're going to be uncertain. Like buying a $500,000 asset, $700,000 asset, if you've never bought anything before and taking on debt, it's a scary thing. So indecisiveness is to be expected, but it's just getting all the information and then being set on the right path and making the correct decision. That's what's a game changer.
Do you think it's a bit of being comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling as well? Because if you're going to wait until you are like, yeah, cool, I got this, like that's probably not going to happen until you do it.
Yeah, I mean that's a mixture of kind of like grit and taking action. It's just being like,
Yeah.
I got to do it. You know what I mean? I got to do it. I got to take action. That's sort of the combo of those two. The perseverance is sticking with it, but the grit and the taking action, that's those two things. Like, man, anyone that invests, you got to take the hat off to them because they've done something that's like, it's a scary thing taking on debt and going and buying something that's that much, especially if you're not making a huge, millions of bucks or whatever. It's risk. All investing is risk. While it's exciting on one side, there's also nerves that come in, especially when you start out.
So I want to ask you, as far as the action steps concerned,
yes,
we've got circle of influence, solution-based thinking, sacrifice, grit and perseverance, and action. What's an action step that someone can pull out the headphones right now on one of these? Not all of them. Don't group them all together. What's like the most important one that someone should go, all right, done?
There's probably two. Oh, it depends on where they are. This is why they all are relevant to everyone. If you're a first timer or if you're not in the right position yet, what are you willing to sacrifice to help get you into your first deal? Are you in the same position as Bailey and bloody Kyle? And there's that opportunity to get yourself in the first deal. You're whinging about not being able to afford a place, but you got a 50, 60, 80,000 or even a $30,000 car and you've got 20 grand's worth of savings and that could maybe get you into your first deal. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice and do an audit of that? What could you do?
I like that.
Could you also work another job? Are you willing to sacrifice a couple of extra hours every night to get you into your first deal? I work 2 to 3 jobs every week for multiple years, plus all these other things that all formulated into it. What are you really willing to sacrifice to do this? Because I don't like when people whinge if there's still money on the table, if there's still solutions on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly what you mean.
Almost everybody, there is a solution to get into the first deal or the next deal if they're willing to do it and if they're willing to hear it and then implement. And maybe that's the action step for that person to get to the next level.
I like that, man. I think personally the good thing to remember with that as well is if you're going to do an extra job, like you said, like you worked at a bar, didn't you?
Yeah.
Is that one of the extras? Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't do it forever.
No.
You did that for what, 3 years, 4 years?
No, it was like 2 years. That one was less than 2 years. Yeah.
2 years.
Yep.
And a complete game changer.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be doing what you're doing today if it wasn't for that.
100%. Yeah, for sure, man.
Anyone can get a bit of extra grit, a bit of extra hours for a couple of years.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, what are you willing to, like, we're just talking a couple of hours on the couch, that you probably otherwise would have been on the couch, or if you would otherwise be training in the gym in the night, instead of train in the morning, do those few hours. Do it for a year. You're going to get your first deal. Get your first deal. You potentially could have a story like Bailey and Kyle. Like, man, how cool a story is that going to be to tell you, your kids, your mates, your parents, whoever? That is a cool story. I'm proud of that story for those boys and for what we helped them do as well. That's a cool story.
I like them.
Man, the other things, this is the thing, you can action all this stuff. Solutions-based thinking. What problems have been brought to you? What are you potentially putting off that you can solve right now? Literally go in there with an open, clean mindset. Do not think negatively about any of it. How do I create the solution with this? If the property manager's brought you nothing, that is what you need to take back. We gave them the action steps before of what you need to ask the property manager. I'm on the other side of the country. I actually don't know any trades in that area, or I have no idea how to fix this thing. Can you please bring me 2 solutions around how to fix this thing so we can work through it together? Done. Little bit of a less aggressive approach than last time. I was just fired up because it literally just happened last time. Circle of influence.
Have you read the comment section?
I probably should. I haven't read it though. Next one being circle of influence. What can you, man? Everyone should do an audit on who's in their circle of influence. Who could you potentially positively impact? Who do you need to potentially talk to about winding down or eliminating the negativity? Do an audit of your circle of influence. And sometimes we need to backtrack a little bit from people because sometimes it's family. Obviously, you don't always want to cut family, but sometimes you need to like backtrack a little bit from the negativity and not allow it to potentially enter the household or something like that. And then sometimes you got friends that you need to have those conversations, those tough conversations with. But then on the alternative, who do you have that maybe we can positively impact? I just heard this story that Sammy was talking about with these guys, and then you play it at that point, or the boys jump in the ute, or the girls jump in the car to go to the gym in the afternoon, and you put that bit on just there, and you play that bit about what those guys did in that 12-month window, or what they were willing to sacrifice for that. And you go, oh, hang on a sec, boys, I just want to listen to this really good part of this. And then they all hear it, and they go, like, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, these little things. Try and think strategically about it. How can you impact? Because then you're on the journey with them as well, and then you'll all be competing, and then you're all going to be trying to get to 3 properties first.
I did ask for 1 action step, and we've got 3 so
there
far.
You go. Take that. You're welcome.
All right, Sam, we've arguably arrived at the most important question, which I've asked you a ton. So I'm going to change it up a little bit.
Okay, hit me with it.
Sam Gordon.
Yes.
What is your favorite pizza place to go to?
Ooh, mate, it's a good question. I'm going to say there's 2.
It's always more than one. I give you one. You take two or three.
I've got it. I'm sharing the love. If you're on the southern end of the Gold Coast, there's Toro's Pizzas in Palm Beach.
Okay,
They're really
Toro's.
good. Yeah, Toro's. And then if you're on the middle, the northern end, Matteo's, which is I used to live in Clear Island Waters. And there was this little like Italian joint called Matteo's. These are wood-fired pizzas.
Matteo's, is that the one that does that amazing 4-cheese gnocchi?
I don't know.
There's one at Broad Beach. It's real good. I think it's Matteo's. I don't know. Bianca, do you remember what that's called? Gemelli's.
Oh, Gemelli's. Nah, Gemelli's is next to Muumu's.
Gemelli's is good. Oh, yeah, that is next to Muumu's.
Gemelli's is good. Yeah.
See,
if I make the trip to go to Broady, I was like, Gemelli's or Muumu's. I just go Muumu's. Go for the steak.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I have had the 4-cheese gnocchi at Gemelli's, and it is good.
It is real good.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
well, I've taken us away from pizza.
We're at the pasta.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Sam, it is always a pleasure having you on the show, mate. You've dropped a lot of knowledge bombs here and a lot of action steps for people to take away. But I think the biggest thing with this episode is that there is nothing that you've said that is out of reach for anyone listening.
100%.
Almost everything in here can be actioned. The level that it wants to be actioned to, or that someone wants to action it, that's going to be dependent. But you can always start it. And that's one of the big reasons I wanted to make this episode with you. So Sam Gordon from Australian Property Scout, thank you so much for jumping on the show, man.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Thanks for having us on.